Hi, welcome to a special video edition of Week in Review. I'm joined, like in the good old days, by Pamela Riemenschneider, now a retail expert. So this is SEPC Charlotte week, and neither of us are there this week, but we got
Yeah.
some pretty good news out of it.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those things where it's like, when the big shows come up, you're like, I wish I was there. You get the FOMO, the show FOMO, right? I love the SCPC shows, particularly. I mean, it's a lot of people, a lot of quality engagement, of course. But for me, the data nerd, I want to know what Anne Marie has to say, especially the fall edition of the research that she puts together, the What's New. And she and the Southeast Produce Council put together a really great survey trying to dig into the why. Like the power of produce, a lot of it is here are the numbers, and then let's talk to some retailers about what we're seeing in stores. And the what's new is talks about how the changes are happening and the why behind the changes. And there's a couple of things I think need to be on people's radars. Um, the biggest thing Anne Marie told me was that we are seeing vegetable sales underperform. And it's been the last 5 years, fruit has outperformed vegetables, and we're seeing it decline even further. And it's not an economic thing because vegetable prices, tended to not be super inflated. And the economy can't be blamed for everything. She dug into it and she told me that it's the millennial and boomer dynamics. Um, as boomers become less important spenders when we talk about groceries, and millennials, and hey, listen, you're not going to like reading the press release either because it completely skips over Gen X.
I was,
Um,
it seemed like there was a generation in between those two who has the most buying power right now.
yeah, so
Well, it has the most when you split millennial in two, which a lot of researchers do, I've seen.
right, okay, so what? No mention of Gen X, but I'm just going to put that's par for the course. You should be used to this by now.
We are.
So she told me, and I'm gonna read what she told me. Millennials are representing the vast majority of the growth in the produce department, but they are more engaged with fruit than vegetable. The survey had dug into why. They themselves over-index for fruit, and they like it more. And the pattern worsens with millennials' kids. Parents modify meals. So if Johnny doesn't like broccoli, they leave the broccoli out of it or they modify it. Snacking is fruit oriented, fruit centric. If you think about the growth in the produce department over people who are my age and younger, basically with kids my kids' ages and younger, fruit is flashy, fruit is branded, fruit is, berries. Berries are like when I was a kid, you didn't snack on raspberries, and nowadays my kids are used to mowing down an entire club store pack of raspberries before we even left Costco. But that's how they grew up, and that was totally normal. So I can see how fruit would over-index with this age group of this younger parents with children still in the home, also known as millennials. There's a
Right.
few Gen X parents with kids still in the home, but they're aging out of that, right?
I know how that goes. As far as the news that I see in the produce industry, there is a lot of new product stuff when it comes to fruit. And when I think about vegetables and what we get, I see a lot of splash around salads and then potatoes. And
Yeah.
then that's kind of about it. I've not seen a ton of vegetable promotion, advertising, marketing, not nearly as much as fruit.
I mean, is it a margin issue? Is it we're barely scraping by on the two nickels we can rub together as we're selling these tomatoes to make them sexy for young families? I know there's a lot of trade outs going on in produce departments. I mean, I went to the grocery store today and I am a keen hunter of what I call death row food, things that have been marked down. So my store's got these little bags that call it Inner Beauties. And it's 50% off of whatever's in that bag. And I've actually traded out of fancy tomatoes to the humble Roma because the cost and the price point is so different between a little clamshell of fancy tomatoes versus a big old produce bag of Roma tomatoes. But where's the money to invest in marketing commodity Roma tomatoes to young families?
Yeah, t tomatoes are one of those ones. We did just have an inflation report today. I was going to look up tomatoes because they do have, well, their year over year inflation last month was 5.7. And then this month it is it actually dropped. But it had tomato inflation had been high all season pretty much. So
Right.
that is a legitimate pain point for consumers.
Well, and you think about the commodity boards that are up and running for veg. Potatoes is the granddaddy of them all. I mean, Potatoes USA, Idaho Potato Commission, they got deep pockets to go out there and be promoting for busy families. And when you think of something like lettuce or artichokes or something like that, the group fund of marketing dollars isn't really cohesive on that kind of thing. And then there's some huge players. I mean, Ocean Mist is out there doing what it can, but it's not exactly got Super Bowl advertising money like Avocados from Mexico does, or Idaho Potato Commission. I don't we've never seen an Idaho Potato Commission Super Bowl ad, and I'm not sure we're going to. But we do
They
have
have
some
their
pretty
own
classy stuff.
college football bowl.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. And maybe one day I can see my kid kicking a potato as an advertisement for one of these potato bowls. I would love to see that one day. Some of the other things, the key findings that she found, millennials are now 68% of produce dollars at retail over the last year. Gen Z is adding a lot of momentum to that. Let's see. Millennials consider themselves foodies, but aren't great home chefs. They like fast meals and global fare, social media trends. And then traditional grocery is losing market share to millennials as they shop more in supercenters and club stores. And from what I see online, there is a whole lot of love for the club store. I don't know if it's behind the scenes that Costco and Sam's are influencing the influencers as far as shopping content goes, but there's a whole lot of content geared toward club store purchases.
Well, BJ's, even though it's not in my market, it's big in the East, and they seem to be doing quite well too, and have been putting out a lot of news lately.
Yeah, they have, and they even are building a fresh distribution center even farther west. So I think BJ's is going to be a bigger player toward the center of the country and not just the East Coast and up to the Mississippi. I think we're going to see a lot more from BJ's. We're going to see a lot more from Aldi. I mean, we've talked about this a million times, right? But I don't have an Aldi within 30 minutes of my house, and that's about to change because in the intersection that there's a Walmart here, there's an HEB here. Pretty soon, it's gonna be Aldi on the other side of the road, taking over the real estate from Big Lots, a retailer that went bankrupt and closed all its stores. There's a whole lot of discount-oriented real estate come available, and I wonder how many more Aldis are gonna pop up in former Big Lots spaces.
Yeah, that's an interesting angle. Although the size of that store doesn't seem to compute with an Aldi. Big
Yeah, it
Lots
does
are
seem a little
big
bit bigger.
stores, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit bigger, and this will be, of course, this reminds me of the other store that I have very close to my house, about 2,000 feet that way. I have a Whole Foods that used to be the Whole Foods 365, and I can remember taking my laptop and working in the Starbucks that's in the parking lot, and I would like look through the blinds waiting for it to open. Unfortunately, this Big Lots only has a Wendy's and a Taco Bell in the parking lot, so I will not be camping out at Taco Bell waiting for this grocery store to open. But you can bet that Probably a greater percentage of my HEB dollars are gonna, drift over to Aldi. We'll see how long that lasts. But you know what? HEB is gonna know what's happening because I use their credit card too.
Oh
So
my.
they're gonna be like, "Hey, wait a minute!" They're gonna send me some targeted ads and be like, "We noticed you're spending more money at not just Costco, but now you're cheating on us with Aldi. What's up?"
They're not going to be happy with that.
Well, I don't get 5% cash back on Aldi store brands like I do with HEB store brands. So um, they've got a compelling argument.
I could see that. Well, before we get going, I did want us to talk about a trend that I'm seeing, and I even wrote a column about it last month for our Blueprints digital magazine. And that is a government-run grocery store because Kansas City had one it's about 7 miles north of where I live. It was government-run and had been for a number of years, and they uh, trying to think what was the number that they spent over a 10-year period. The city government of Kansas City spent $29 million. So that means 29 million in taxpayer dollars to support this store that was run by a nonprofit called Community Builders. And the big news was that it closed. And it closed for a number of reasons. High crime, dwindling customers, supply chain problems, labor problems, management problems, motivation problems. I would say a lack of expertise about the food supply chain. It was just the more I read about this, the more I thought, how did you think that was going to work? And why did you think that was a good idea?
When you mentioned the name of the organization that was running it, I am remembering back to a Midwest Produce Expo back in the day when that was in Kansas City. And some of those folks coming around our trade show floor, asking questions. Can you get me data on the top 5 fruits that are sold in grocery stores, and telling me about some of the issues that they were having with sell through on those items. And I can imagine it. Anyone in the grocery business will tell you that it's not easy to run a grocery store. And you have to have the expertise to do it. And even the largest, seller of widgets in the world, Amazon, I wouldn't say is a resounding success in grocery, despite putting almost 10 years into it. So for a one-off local grocer that was not managed very well, it doesn't surprise me that it doesn't run out. Now, we were talking about SEPC, and I remember not too long ago, Kimberly Williams Paisley was the featured speaker at one of their events talking about their organization, The Store in Nashville, which is a nonprofit grocery that they run. And then there's the North Market in Minneapolis. And then you just had a press release today about an Atlanta one that is opening up. So, and then there's one that
The Atlanta one is partnering with IGA, so and that's actually who sent the press release. So it sounds like a little bit different situation than the Kansas City one.
Right, right. And then there was one I was reading in Modern Retail, the Rural Grocery Initiative at K-State, Kansas State University, talks about a city-owned one in Kansas that opened in 2013. That was a public-private partnership. So these things can work, but as with any grocery, it can't be in a dud of a location, right? So if it is a location that's just not going to work for grocery, there would be a grocery store there already if it was going to work.
Well,
So
that's
then,
one of the troubling things about how this story was reported too, is because it was sold to the public as being a solution for a food desert, and it is an impoverished area. But the problem with the food desert angle is there is an Aldi less than a mile away, like 8 blocks away, and there's also a local, not a Price Chopper Kansas City, but a local chain like a mile east of there. So it really wasn't in a food desert, and so
right.
that's one of the things that upset me as a Kansas City, Missouri taxpayer. I did not like that. I didn't like hearing that story, and that's the wrong spin. It wasn't in a food desert.
Right. Yeah. So there are examples and sometimes it can be beneficial for public-private partnerships for nonprofits to come in and operate something where a grocery store wouldn't be have the profit margin it needs to sustain itself, but it is all you have to treat it like a real store. You have to stock it like a real store. You have to have the knowledge of what's going to sell best, and what's going to work best for the neighborhood. Maybe it's more heat and eat type foods than ingredients. Maybe it's more, rotisserie chickens and bags of salad than, whole leaf field packed heads of romaine that maybe someone would buy one of those. They're this big. I don't even buy, most of those most of the time. I buy the hearts of romaine and chop it myself. But sometimes even chopping romaine is a step too much for people who do not have a well-equipped kitchen. And so the retailer that goes into those areas has to really carefully think out what it's going to offer and how it's going to offer it and how it's going to operate. And so I'm sad that it didn't work out because I want everyone to have access to fresh food. But there's probably a myriad reasons that it didn't. So let's hopefully the one in Atlanta will do a little bit better.
Yes, and I know that the mayoral candidate in New York has floated a government-run system of retail, and I don't think it's going over very well. At least it's certainly not going over well with the bodega system there. They're
What
not.
will the bodega cats do? I got a bodega cat in here.
You do.
Yeah. She's usually over here on the pineapple bed. But that I like the idea of creating opportunities where they don't currently exist. And I've been to many bodegas. The produce department in a bodega is not great, but is it a chicken and egg situation? Is that what the neighborhood wants? They want their bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich, or maybe a bagel or something like that, and not necessarily a fully stocked grocery store.
No, they probably do not. More like a C store, high-level C store
Well, you gotta
type.
think about my kids keep telling me about all the C stores. This is one of my travel destinations where I think about sometimes is going to Asia and seeing a properly stocked 7-Eleven from Asia, where that's where feasibly a lot of people just go and eat all of their food from, but it's not like a C store here in the US where it's like actual meals. And then the cup of ice that you pour your coffee into, and it looks really fascinating, and it's not at all what we see here. Instead, we see Buc-ee's, and you're getting a Buc-ee's soon,
We
right?
are getting a Buc-ee's soon, but I did taking my kid to college, we did go by the world's largest truck stop. And we even stopped and took our time. The rest of my family got some ice creams because there was a Dairy Queen in there. And I perused the produce department, and it was not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. It had a decent selection of fresh cut fruits and vegetables. I was moderately impressed, but I'm sure it wasn't like a Buc-ee's.
All right, we got to stop it here before we go too far on a Buc-ee's tangent.
Okay.
That's it for the Produce Reporter Weekend Review Special Edition. You better call them out of here because I don't know what your end tagline is anymore.
Well, it
No,
is a
here we
special edition, so enjoy the
go.
video version and it'll be print until our next special edition.